Hello and welcome back to the channel. I am your host Tyrant, and today's project is something that I have been looking forward to doing for a very long time. I recently purchased this here. Now this is a Honshu single-handed broadsword with a 1060 high carbon spring steel blade. Now this sword, not this exact sword, but like I have tested this sword, this type of sword, and it's been a pretty awesome blade. Now, I really am a big fan of the blade itself, not particularly the crossguard handle and pommel, so I'm going to be replacing all of them and making them far more to my like and personal preference. But the blade itself, I really like, I really dig it. So I decided to purchase one of these for the specific purpose of modifying it and turning it into hopefully what will be one of my favorite swords. Now, there is a little bit of a tale that I have to tell before we even get into the build. So, as most of you guys watching will know this, you guys know what my job is. My job is to handle swords. It is to use swords. It is to review swords. And I have recommended this particular sword quite a lot. And this sword here wasn't sent to me. I want to make that clear. I purchased it with my own money. I went out to a vendor and I purchased this sword with my own money for me. And what I received was not acceptable. When it first arrived, the crossguard was rattling, the handle was rattling, and the screws were as tight as they could be. On top of that, the pommel was spinning around, the inside joint had broken. Now, this brings up an issue because I have recommended this sword before. I've used this sword before and recommended it to people, and I was so unhappy that if I didn't buy this sword specifically for the purpose of modifying it and just using the blade, I would have returned it. That's how upset I was. Then it got even worse when I disassembled it, because this pommel here, this isn't the original pommel, I changed this pommel, but the original pommel, when I took it off, because a known issue with these Honshu ones that I have had is that the pommels snap off. When you use them in really extreme situations, the pommel tends to snap off because the weld isn't good enough. So I knew when I purchased it that I would have to take off this, I would have to reinforce this, this weld on the joint here. But I was unprepared for what happened when I took the pommel off. The thread that comes stock standard with these things is pathetic. Like, it is literally pathetic. No wonder it snaps off. And when you're holding such a large pommel, because this one has quite a big pommel, like a 400-gram stainless steel pommel with a tiny little thread on it with a tiny little weld, no wonder they snap off all the time, which I think is like, that's crazy. That's crazy. If I purchased this sword just to leave it as is, I would have returned it. However, because I am changing it and I'm upgrading it, it's one of those things where it really bothers me and I have to talk about it and I want to let you guys know about it. But at the same time, because I just need the blade, for me personally, I could let it go. However, it does change the way I view these swords in a lot of ways. So I was able to break off that thread with just my hands, with like finger tension. That's how easy it was and how weak that joint was. But I'm going to upgrade it with a bigger thread and a better weld. But I'm also going to be upgrading the crossguard, the pommel, and a brand new handle that I'm going to make from scratch. And then hopefully by the end of it, we will have a really cool sword. So the build project for my custom sword. First off, I took off the handle and the pommel just to show you guys what we're dealing with in terms of the tang and that pommel thread. And as you can see, I could clearly snap off that pommel thread with just some finger tension. It was not on there good at all. That weld was nowhere near good enough. So, first thing I did was got some Tasmanian oak. That's what I like to use for a lot of my sword handles. It's a nice robust wood, isn't too hard but isn't soft either. So what I did was I cut that into two separate halves and laid out the stencil of the tang onto the oak itself. Then I put it on my milling machine and started to machine out the slot for the tang to fit. I did some refining with some chisels and files, of course, just to make sure that it fit to the tang absolutely perfectly. It had a nice snug tight fit. Now obviously, because this handle is made in two equal halves, I take the width of the tang and divide that by 2, and that's how deep I need to cut my channel on the milling machine. After I've done that, I lay out my pattern and my design, which is this octagonal type design. Very common, very popular design, one of my favorites because it's really comfortable to hold when it's finished, and on top of that, it's really good for edge alignment as well. It's just a beautiful shape for a sword handle. So after I've got the rough shape of the two halves of my handle, what I'll do is I'll glue the two halves together. I find the best way to do this is just to put it on the sword, on the tang itself, and because it's wood glue, it doesn't really stick to things like metal. Let it set, let it stay, and then you can easily pull it off and remove any of the excess glue that gets onto the tang. After that, it is time to actually refine the shape on the belt sander of the handle. This can be the most long and tedious process because you want to get this right, you want to get everything consistent, you want to get all your grind lines looking the same, and you also want to get a nice thickness. Now when it comes to handles, the trickiest part is actually grinding more than you would want. The reason why is because you're going to put cord wrap over it, and then you may put leather wrap over it as well. So if you get your handle, your wood handle, perfect, then once you actually put on the cord wrap and the leather, it's going to be too thick. So you want to grind it a little bit thin, and that's what I did with this one. I grinded this one very thin, which I think personally turned out fantastic because it matches the crossguard and pommel perfectly. So after the handle shape is pretty much exactly how I want it, I will then char the handle. After that, I'm going to use some super glue and glue some very thin pieces of leather as the risers. Usually you'll put one near the top, near the crossguard, one down near the center to separate the top hand and the bottom hand, and then one down near where the pommel connects. I think it creates a lot of seamless transitions. On top of that, it helps your hands naturally stay in positions because you have these little risers to let you know where your hands should be. So after I've got the risers on, that's when I will begin to wrap it. Now this can be quite a tedious process because you want your wrap to be tight, you want it to have no gaps, and because you can have some complex geometric shapes in the handle, that being that it has slopes, it has curves, it has straight lines, it can take a while, and especially if you want it to look really good and to hold up, and you need to kind of glue as you go along. So it's a little hard to film and do at the same time. So this can be a tedious process. I don't really enjoy doing this part of sword handles at all. Then after that, I will spray the entire handle with some contact adhesive, that's what I use, and then get my upholstery leather, which is a very thin, supple, beautiful Tyrant thread, and then I will very slowly, because it can take a while, to stretch that leather over the handle. You want to make sure that it's nice and tight, that you don't have any gaps or wrinkles. You want it to fit very well over the handle, which can take it can be quite finicky and it can take some time to get right. So once the leather is on the handle, we're getting pretty close to the end now. All that I need to do is get another cord wrap over the top of it. Now this cord wrap doesn't stay on. This is to actually give the leather an imprint of the cord shape. This is more as a visual aesthetic, however it does add texture to the supple leather, so it can add some grip as well. How I want to do this is put a little bit of water on the top side of the leather. I don't want to soak it, I don't want to get the wood in the handle wet. I'm just going to put a little bit of water over the top side of the supple leather, then wrap as tight as humanly possible without cutting the leather or breaking the cord, a pattern into the handle itself, and leave that for around, I leave it for around 24 hours. That seems to be long enough. Then once I take it off, you will see that cord has imprinted into the soft leather. And then after I've taken that cord wrap off, the handle is almost done. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some glue in some of the seams just to make sure stuff does not move or come unraveled. And then I'm just going to put some leather conditioner on it, and the handle is ready to go. I did have two variations of the handle that I was playing with, so I've actually made a second one. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm going to have two handles so I can swap them out whenever I like, I guess. You guys can let me know in the comments which handle you actually think was a better design and which one I should have went with. Then after the handle's done, I've got the crossguard and pommel to work on. Now these are aluminum, which is not the final, the final ones, but because the pommel and crossguard can cost hundreds of dollars if I get them CNC'd, getting them out of aluminum was the most realistic option at the moment. I'm just going to polish them up just to so they fit the aesthetic a little bit more, and then the sword is pretty much done. In terms of weight, I did weigh it and it's under 1 kilo. This thing feels absolutely incredible. But with all that out of the way, let's get to some cutting. Let's test cut this thing and get into some of the finer details. Okay guys, here we are ready to do some test cuts with the finished sword. Honestly, it looks beautiful. I am incredibly happy with how this thing has turned out. It feels incredible in the hand. The indexing, the handle, all of it, I am very pleased with. There are some drawbacks, obviously, the fact that these crossguard and pommel is made of aluminum rather than something like steel. The problem was the price. I mean, to get these exact crossguard and pommel made out of steel would cost multiple times what this sword costs. But in terms of, there's some interesting stuff that has happened, right? So in terms of the weight profile of how this blade feels, it is incredible. Because it is such a lightweight material, right? That means that the point of balance has actually shifted. Usually you have your pommel to counteract your blade, but because this blade is so light, I weighed it, this entire thing weighs under 1 kilo. That's insane. And because of that, it means that it's pushed the weight of the blade a little bit further up here rather than down here as a counterbalance. So it's kind of like, it cuts like a katana, but you have all the benefits of something like a longsword, right? Which is incredible. Ooh. So because that weight profile is so special, it means this is like my perfect sword. This is everything that I've ever wanted in a sword. I do think hopefully one day I will replace the crossguard and pommel with something like titanium, which is probably going to be even more expensive than steel, but holy, this is incredible. I love this. Oh. The comfort, the wieldability, the speed that I'm able to generate with this thing is incredible. All right, let's do a couple of water bottles to finish ourselves out. Because the blade itself is already so light, it's so different. I think that's going to be all for today's episode. Thank you guys for watching. I know it's been a while since I posted on the second channel, but this one was a fun one. This turned out incredible. I'm incredibly happy with how it is. It's beautiful. This is my favorite sword. Favorite sword now. That's going to be all. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye-bye.